Hey there, it's Natalie. I'm excited you're here for this episode because we're diving into a topic that's more relevant than ever, puberty, and why it's happening younger. Today, I'm joined by a return guest and dear friend, Dr. Sheryl Ziegler, one of the leading experts on child development. I've interviewed Dr. Ziegler many times, long before I even launched this podcast, and every conversation with her is packed with insight. For those of you who may be new here, my background is in journalism, specifically health reporting. I spent most of my career at the news desk in TV stations across the country, but after years of watching fear-based news dominate the industry, I decided to create this podcast, a space focused on science-backed, expert-driven conversations that truly help people. In this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the early onset of puberty, body image, and how our past experiences influence the way we approach parenting today. Dr. Ziegler shares invaluable advice on how to prepare kids for these big changes in their lives. It's scary to them. She's also going to talk about the power of open conversations and some surprising links between stress, puberty, and menopause. Trust me, you're going to want to take notes on this one. So settle in and let's get into this discussion. And before we start, don't forget to subscribe here to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you want more expert insights and health tips, be sure to sign up for my weekly newsletter. It's natalietysdal.com. Let's get started. Sheryl, it's a pleasure. We have known each other for so many years that I get excited when I see new material you have because I know you've put so much into it. And this is a highly searched topic and it has to do with health, but it also has to do with relationships and it has to do with parenting. So tell us about your new book.
Yes, all the things. I'm so happy to be back. Thank you for having me back. And as I've shared with you before, the first time I rolled out talking about it was when probably like shortly after it was sold. So The Crucial Years is my book title, and so I was so excited to talk to you about earlier puberty then. And now the book has actually all come together. So I wrote this book, The Crucial Years, that's out on May 6th, because I felt like people maybe aren't even aware of how much earlier things are happening. Like there's a saying like third grade is the new grade for Mean Girl stuff to start. And people are like, what? Third grade? We're like, yes, because earlier puberty, when it's happening, and I don't mean early puberty is precocious puberty, but earlier just means, hey, this is average. And 8 years old is considered on the young end, but still within the average range. So third grade, you start to see behaviors that parents are like, wait, I thought this was maybe going to happen in middle school. How is this happening in third grade? And the other thing that corresponds is that 8 years old is the average age for a kid in America to get a smartphone. So all of a sudden, you've got the world at your fingertips. Some people around you are starting the internal process that you don't see on the outside yet of hormone shifts and puberty. And the combination is all of a sudden, particularly for girls in third grade, boys are more fourth grade, where you start to see behaviors that most people don't expect at this age.
I just think this is so shocking. If we can just draw it back just for a moment, do we know why? Is it food? Is it an environment? Do we know why?
Check. Potentially all of the above. So as of right now, there is not one consensus. So if you are looking for one answer, the science doesn't back up one thing. It backs up a couple of things, leading with childhood obesity. So the more weight that a child has on them, body fat, things like that, we see that as a very high correlate to earlier puberty. That's number one. Then there are endocrine disruptors. So that environmental piece, what are the products that kids are using? How are certain plastics and other environmental toxins impacting the endocrine system? So that's another one. And another one that's really high is social stress. So kids who are growing up in high stress home environments, who are experiencing maybe trauma or again, just a sustained level of stress are more likely to go into earlier puberty than kids their age of the same size and age who have less stress.
Oh, that's interesting. I've been talking about menopause on some episodes and on social media and kind of find the same thing on the other end of the spectrum is that stress and high cortisol levels and all of that can push a woman into menopause earlier. So all of this, to go back to the crucial years, does that mean that girls are getting their periods that young? Or, for us growing up, it really was the middle school years where that happened.
Absolutely. So let's make sure we do that menopause connection thing, because that's also very interesting. But what it looks like is usually 1 to 2 years after you have your first signs of puberty, you then menstruate. So if a child is at 8 years old, and again, not the outward signs yet, but starting to get really moody, starting to have these ups and downs, maybe they even have a little bit of pubic hair, which a lot of times parents don't see. Those are the beginning signs. And so 1 to 2 years after is when you can see that. So about 10 years old. So that can be 4th to 5th grade for girls. So we are really looking at 10 as being what you probably consider the new 12. I remember I got my period at 12 and I felt like I was young. I was on the earlier side.
12 to 13 was middle school.
Yes. Yeah. 7th, 8th grade. It's not really a 7th or 8th grade issue, menstruating anymore. It's really a later elementary. It's a 5th, 6th grade issue now, and we aren't preparing our kids. So most places, meaning most schools, let's say a public school, they usually have sort of the talk about all of these changes in 5th grade.
It's always been that 5th, 6th grade.
Yep. 5th and 6th grade. Yeah. My son is, I think, having it this week. So in 6th grade, and started one at the end of 5th grade. And maybe for boys, that's okay. But for girls, it's way too late. And really, it's too late for boys as well. For girls, by 5th or 6th grade, the average girl in America has breasts, has some pubic hair, has already going through their mood swings. Even if they haven't gotten their period, that process has started. So for us to then be telling them then is honestly too late. And it's very interesting how this topic it can be actually a little bit controversial. People don't want to educate their kids any earlier than they have to. But I think that comes from our stuff. That's our memory of no one ever talked to me. So I felt really scared. I didn't know what was happening to my body. And we're putting that onto this generation of kids that's really open and also has access to ask the questions about these kinds of things. So we're really truly at an impasse. Yeah. I hope people, part of the book is like, there's a couple of times where I'll stop. I'll say like, right now would be a good time to stop and pause and think about who talked to you. And again, this book doesn't cover sex. This isn't about sex, but it is partly saying our bodies are getting ready for sexual reproduction, meaning kids' bodies are at much younger ages. And that impacts social, emotional, learning, self-esteem, body image, a lot of different areas. So sometimes I'll have the reader pause and stop and say, check in with yourself. Because our memories and our experience while our bodies and brains were developing absolutely impact how we're going to deal with everything from acne to, I get this at least a couple times a month. My kids actually parents will say things like, parents will ask me questions like, what do I do? My kid is a little pudgy. They have a little excess weight around their waist, or honestly, they're overeating all the time. What do I do? Do I confront it? Do I say something to them? Do I not? And so our stuff and our baggage around our body image or how someone spoke to us is going to impact the way we're going to do it with our own kids.
Yeah. What do you tell them when you get that question?
There's an entire chapter on body image. And it's really interesting because I had a couple of readers review that chapter before it was ever even final. It's just in the writing stage. And 100% of the readers, which was, 6 to 8 readers, said this chapter needs a trigger warning. And I'm like, what? It does? And they're like, oh God, yes. I was so triggered reading this chapter.
Wow.
And that really shocked me. And so we actually put a trigger warning on the whole book and then a secondary one, because I know people aren't expecting it. But when we think about your child, and I'll get to the answer of what do you say, but think about 1st grade to 6th grade in your own life, right? The things that might have happened. You might have had the first loss of a grandparent. Parents might have gotten a divorce. People moved during those times. A sibling might have been born. Major stuff happens. A parent might have gone back to work. A parent might have lost their job. So major things happen in that 6-year period of time. But what gets the attention and what our memories, consciously remember the most is usually high school. Middle school is like half blocked out because most people have a horrible experience. And so what do you say to those kids that are, between the ages of 6 and 12, and maybe you notice that they're overeating or they're emotionally eating or their, body is holding on to extra weight? I think one of the things to say and to remember truly is, what are our bodies meant for, right? When you're 8 years old, what should your body be doing? What do you want it to be doing? Right? So a kid might say, I want to play soccer and I want to swim in the summertime. I want to run around and, play whatever, hot lava on the playground, those kind of things. And so if anything comes up, you just say to your child, you focus on the health and the functioning of the body, not the aesthetic. It's not how do you look. Even though as they get older and older, they do get self-conscious. They don't need us to say something like, right? Like as I was a kid, beauty and bodies were commented on all the time.
All the time.
All the time. I mean, I am Hispanic, and in a Hispanic culture, looks are really, really important. I mean, I would have family members, they'll pinch the fat on your body. They'll pinch your love handle, and it's just cultural. And they'll say, "Oh, I think you're eating too much rice and beans," or "I think you're," and it was like just a total part of how I grew up. Didn't even think anything of it. Nowadays, that would be, we know what the repercussions are. We have an entire generation, particularly of mothers, who have a lot of issues with body. The other day, I saw a friend and she said to me, "Wow, you look really good. Have you lost weight?" And I laughed and I said, "I've been working out and I have lost body fat. I actually haven't lost any weight, but I have lost some body fat and I gained some muscle." And I said, "But do you know that you're the only person that's commented?" And she was like, stared at me and she goes, "That's just because I have a ton of issues around body image." Right. So we're two grown women, but it still shows up like that.
Yeah, but there's still that question. I mean, we're talking adults now versus kids, but there's still that question when I see someone who's lost a lot of weight and I think, do I say something? Do they want me to say something? What should I say? Am I going to offend? Am I going to compliment? Like, it's still so sensitive.
I totally agree. And I've stopped commenting, but I'm with you. I've stopped that. So like there are times where I've seen, and again, I want to make it clear, as adolescents and pre-adolescents, body image issues and disordered eating and eating disorders affect much more girls and women. In adulthood, it gets even. Men get right up there with women. So yes, as kids, it might impact girls more, but boys are still impacted. But as adults, they're right up there. Men are up there too. It just isn't talked about. But I agree with you. I don't say it anymore. But I also have the times where let's say I see somebody and they just look particularly good. And maybe they've lost a significant amount of weight, right? Or it's hard not to say anything. But what I say, or I try, I don't know that I'm perfect about it, is I'll just say, you look, whatever I really think, you look like you're full of energy. You look like you're full of life. You look like you're just feeling really good, like you're glowing. I'll just say things like that. And then maybe more naturally, if somebody wants to, they'll say, "Yeah, I've been working out, or I changed my diet. I've lost 40 pounds. Wow." And then they can share that if they want to. And if they don't want to, they can just say, "Thank you."
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. Well, let's go back to the middle school girls or the younger. You mentioned that girls, what often you find is that girls don't want that puberty earlier, boys maybe do. How do you deal with that? Especially a girl who's like, "Oh no, it's coming. I don't want this." And they're 8, they're 9. And how do we start those conversations? Or what's your
Yeah, I have a really strong take on it because I've been doing this. It's mostly mother-daughter, but it's parent-child puberty course for almost 12 years now. And in the class, when I give it, inevitably, and I mean literally, it's never not happened, there will be a couple of girls when we start talking. The class is broken up. Like I start with physical changes in puberty, then I go to emotional, and then I end with social. So I break it up in 3s. And when I'm doing the physical part, which is how I lead the class, there inevitably are a few girls who literally start crying. And I don't mean like sobbing, bawling, like there's tears, or they curl up because it's mother-daughter or parent-child. So they'll kind of like literally their body kind of goes into their mother's lap. They might lean on them and there's tears. And, at some point, either they volunteer it or their parent might raise their hand and say, what if I don't want this to happen to me? And so then we slow down and I'll say something like, tell me what you're thinking. What are you scared of? What questions do you have? That's why I start with the physical, because it's like, whoa, I have a lot of questions. What do you mean? Like, I'm going to get breasts. And so they'll just say things like, even taller sometimes. I don't want to get taller and I don't want to have breasts. And I don't want my hips to get bigger, because they have just heard me say, these are the ways that your body's going to change. And I tell them, because it's the truth, you are going to put on weight. Because if you think about what a average 7 or 8 year old body looks like, it's this little thing, right? And then they're going to get bigger, stronger. Muscles are going to get bigger. Truly, they're going to have more fat content. Their hips are going to grow wider. And I talk to them about the biology behind that. Our hips get wider should we ever want to birth a child. It needs to make room for it. And they're like sitting there wide-eyed. And so I think it needs to be met with first curiosity. And that is my overall advice. Yesterday, I got one of my first sort of official book reviews back. And that's part of what the review was around. Is it's said in there, like, this book will constantly remind you how to just listen to your child, right? So don't make assumptions, because again, remember, my baggage and your baggage, they're going to influence how we're going to react and what we're going to say. And so you want to slow it down and you want to say, I can see this is bringing out a lot of emotion in you right now. I'm wondering how you're feeling. I'm wondering what you're thinking. What questions do you have? Right? Don't make assumptions. That's my first bit of advice. But a second piece, which I hope this is a big part of the book, or just really the message, not part of the book, but it's part of my message, which is celebrate this. This is a beautiful time. Like the whole thing is like, these are thought of as the forgotten years. We don't talk to our kids. We don't tell them what's going to be happening. We don't really prepare them because we're pretty focused on reading, writing, and learning.
Yeah.
Right. And so celebrate it, meaning like when we take the class, I am not kidding. Girls come in looking scared and avoidant. They don't want to be there, most of them. And they leave literally, not even metaphorically, like skipping out of the class. Right. It's awesome. It's like the most adorable, fulfilling things that I do, really, is one of them, because they leave like, I can handle this. I can do this. And there's a reason for breasts, right? In our culture, we sexualize breasts, but I tell them, the reason why we grow breasts is should you ever want to nurse and feed your baby, that's how we were meant to do that, if you can do that, right? And they're like, oh. And then they'll go, once they get comfortable, they'll be like, how big are my breasts going to be? Well, breast size is pretty genetic. And then they laugh, and then they'll look at their mom. So all of a sudden, you go from 5 minutes ago, I don't even want to say the word breast, to 5 minutes of education around breasts. I talk about there's 4 stages of breast development, and this is they've got names, and at the end of it, and everything's always should you want to have a baby, should you want to nurse that baby. And then all of a sudden it's just like, everybody good? We got it? Let's talk bras. Here's what bras are. Here's the bras that correspond pretty well to each stage. And it's like, all of a sudden you normalize it, and before you know it, it's like menopause. We used to not talk about menopause at all.
Not
right?
at all.
And
That was
now
old people stuff.
Total old people stuff. Now we're talking about perimenopause. Now we're talking about, hey, at 35, which for most people does not sound old, 35, your perimenopause symptoms can start. The more we talk about things and normalize it, the easier it is. And I know for me personally, my talking about menopause started last summer. So it hasn't been that long. We're actively, openly, and it's amazing how comfortable I am too. It's just no big deal.
Yeah.
Talk about it right now. No big deal. But you got to talk about it to break that barrier, to break down the stigma that can get associated with things that we are uncomfortable talking about.
Which is so different from our parents' generation. We
Opposite.
didn't really talk about sex and periods, certainly not menopause. It was so personal.
No, and I feel for that generation of women, many, many generations of women who had nobody to talk to. Nobody. just went through it on their own, thought they were crazy, thought they were losing their memory.
Yeah.
Even the brain fog, even having a term, let's say like brain fog, or for tweens, right? Just saying to them like, oh, the roller coaster of middle school. Just when we give something a label, sometimes we say, oh, don't label my kid. Well, sometimes a label or just giving language to an issue can insinuate it's not just me, because there's like a name for this. So that must mean at least one other person on this planet has gone through this or experiences this. That is life-changing.
Yeah. I want to talk about, so now you said girls are starting puberty earlier. Are boys too?
Yes. The age is still behind the girls. So if girls, again, considering average, young end of average is 8 for girls, it's 9 for boys. Boys are about a year to a year and a half behind girls.
So it used to be high school for boys, middle school for girls, high school where you'd see the growth spurts in the boys and the mustache and all of that. But now we're seeing that more so in boys in middle school.
That's right. That's right. Which is surprising. I mean, think back. I know you have kids who have been through middle school. In middle school now, how many kids do you know that you're like, oh my gosh, there's a kid who's like 5'10", who's 6 feet, like
with full armpit hair.
And then you've got a kid who's 4'9".
Yes. So that I feel like, and I have 2 older girls and a high school son. I feel like there's more of a discrepancy with boys, though, that there are still boys who have not hit puberty in high school, and some who you're like, that's a man in middle school.
Yes.
Is that true? Are we seeing more discrepancy there?
Yeah. There's what's really interesting about the boy piece is that it's experienced really differently. So for a boy in our culture to be tall, to be muscular, means that they're bigger, stronger, faster. And they're wired for that. They're wired for that aggression, competition, excelling in their sports. So it's very interesting. I will say it's very, again, people don't think about it. For a boy, when they're very tall, but they're very lanky, they're usually pretty self-conscious. That doesn't feel desirable to them. So for anybody who thinks automatically like, oh, my kid is 14 and 6 feet tall, there is a very good chance he is highly uncomfortable in his own body. And so this is the other thing that we do, and I am working so much on it. Just like we were talking about, what do you say when you see someone who's lost weight and they look so fantastic and you're like, gosh, do I say anything? It's the same thing with a kid who is obviously going through puberty, right? Their voice is cracking. Yes. For boys. So if we focus on boys, please, I have a whole like breakout section in the book about this. Don't comment on kids' bodies. Don't say to the kid who last time you saw was 4'9" and now they're 5'5" or something, look at you, you've grown so much. I know that seems innocent. You're saying, I'm not commenting on their weight. Isn't that a good thing? Boys want to be tall. But what you're doing is you're reinforcing, like, my body is on display for you to judge and comment on. So what if I peak here? What if I don't get so tall? What if I am 6 feet tall and I'm terrible at basketball? No, I'm not a volleyball player, right? We stereotype kids. You're tall and look this way, so you must.
Yeah.
And that's putting pressure on kids. They don't want to walk into a room, right? All of us can probably remember, you have extended family over for a holiday and you're going through puberty. I bet every person can remember a moment where a grandparent, an aunt, or uncle said something about your body that just mortified you.
Yeah.
Right? If for a girl, well, look at you. Aren't you looking like a young lady now? Oh, we know what that means.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right?
And I think of that with a tall son. Like, even just saying, you've grown 2 inches, it reinforces to them, you're noticing everything about me. You're noticing my physical appearance versus just don't even go there. We do it all the time because he keeps outgrowing everybody. He's like now outgrown all his sisters and dad's the last one. But for me, he's already outgrown me. And we comment on it in a loving way, but it is just telling him we're noticing this.
Yes. Yes. And again, I'm always trying to think about like someone hearing this or maybe reading about it and being skeptical and saying, well, I don't think so. It's just in our family and we don't mean anything by it. And as a matter of fact, my son loves it. He's saying, oh, measure me, right? Or my daughter loves it. She's growing taller. it's not to say that, I'm not saying that 100% of kids hate this and don't do it. What I'm saying is we have a problem with disordered eating, body image issues, and eating disorders. And part of that is a society that is constantly remarking on the status of our body. You're thin, you're big, you're tall, you're short, you have big breasts, you're flat chested, and those, you have muscles, you don't. And for that starts, it's a piece of the pie that starts a culture of, see, my internal thoughts around being very critical of myself are reinforced. This is the way of the world. So I need to be critical of myself before I go downstairs and mom, dad, and whoever say, oh, did you grow 2 inches while you slept last night? We do stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What about the puberty piece then? Because if we're not commenting on their physical body, but they're about or they are going through puberty, do we openly talk about that and say, like, I see a few hairs under your arm when you lift, are those okay? Or is that pointing out the things that are making them self-conscious?
So I'll say two things. First is, what do you do instead of, right? And it's a little bit easier to talk about when you're a parent, you see your kid every day. But when you are maybe seeing your son's best friend, who you maybe haven't seen in a couple of weeks, and really, he could have grown 2 inches in the last month, right? Or you haven't seen your nephew since last Christmas, whatever it might be. My advice is, you want to comment, or your opening, right? Your small talk conversation opener about them as a person. Hey, buddy, like, I haven't seen you in a month, or I haven't seen you since last year. What have you been up to? What are you doing? What activities are you in, or sports or clubs? What are you reading these days? What are you doing these days? Right? And one of the things he might say is, I started weightlifting, or I'm playing football now. Oh, great. How's that going for you? Right? That's real conversation. You don't have to, because you're going to get there. So let's just say you do it probably the way it's more likely done. Hey, buddy, haven't seen you since last Christmas. Look at you. You must be almost 6 feet tall. Listen to that voice too, right? Then we say things like, I bet the girls are all swooning for you. So now we're putting in this assumption around their sexuality and all that. Then we say, well, clearly you must play basketball, or of course you play football, right? And so what we're doing is, if we're really engaged with the kid, we will eventually get to what I just said, because eventually they'll be like, yeah, I am playing football. Or I do have a girlfriend, or whatever. But you're starting the lead with, I'm observing and judging your body and making assumptions about it. Skip that. Just skip it.
Yeah.
Right? And go straight to, what are you doing these days? And what are you up to? Who are you hanging out with? Do you still love reading? Those kind of things. The same information will get there. They will naturally be like, yeah, what am I doing these days? I actually have a girlfriend now. Wow, you have a girlfriend? Look at that.
Yeah.
You'll get there. Just skip the part that says, hi, I'm judging you.
Right. Well, with our own kids, though, is it best to normalize the puberty in everyday conversation of, like, I did notice your voice drop. Here's what you can do. Or do we normalize it within our own families with our own children?
Yes. So within our own families, here's what I say. First thing I'm a huge fan of is, please educate your kids, if you can, before it happens. Okay. So it doesn't mean you have to do this at 6 years old, but yes, just prepare them. Right. And then now someone listening right now is like, oh my gosh, I have an 11-year-old. This is already happening. And I totally didn't prepare them, because I have the stats in the book. I don't remember them exactly, but they're extremely low. There's even a category for, it's around maybe like 10% of parents never plan to have this talk with their kids. Like, they're just like, on surveys, they'll just be like, no, I'm not going to. Like, I'm just not going to. So instead of waiting until you notice it to say, hey, look at that, you've got armpit hair, or like, oh my gosh, your voice is starting to crack, my advice is to try to be proactive and just let them know that's going to happen. Especially if you're even on the more conservative side, or you say, I've got a teeny tiny kid. Because again, even for boys, their weight is correlated. So if you've got a fifth grader right now who's on the lighter side and, really not showing any signs of puberty, great. This is a great time to say, hey, can you believe it? Middle school is going to start next year. You know what's going to happen in middle school? Everyone's going to start growing at all these different rates. Yeah, it's called puberty. Yeah, Mom, I know. I've heard of puberty. Yeah, you probably have. You
But
probably
they
don't
know
realize
everything. They know it all. They're like,
yeah, they
you
know
don't
it
have
all.
to talk
Right.
about this. I know all this.
I know all this. So the one thing they don't know about puberty that I will say most kids don't know. So I'm trying to even model how casual I am about it. Like I'm frying an egg and having this conversation, right? Is to say two things. Massive, massive discrepancy in when it's going to start, how long it's going to take, because it's years. And they don't know that usually. Hey, bud, it's years of this. And it happens slowly. It's like amazing. I'm always positive about it. Like nature is so amazing and that it will give you like 2 to 4 years to start this. Some people say if you include the brain part, it's 5+ years of this period of puberty. But then, you just say, so yeah, it's going to be so interesting when you go to middle school. There's going to be kids who all of a sudden are going to start getting taller. Their voices are going to change, and other kids that won't even happen until high school. It's all okay. It pretty much evens out. Usually by the end, for a boy especially, I would say it usually evens out by like senior year. Right? That's my tone of voice. What I just told you probably took 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I don't need to say much more. They can keep the conversation going, or they can just be like, this is so weird and I don't want to talk about this. Oh, okay, cool.
Is it so both boys and girls, I'm thinking more boys though, is it better to have a man talk to him about more of the detailed stuff, or are they weirded out when mom talks to him about some of that? Do you find that that's a healthier way, or should we be real casual about that too?
I love that you asked this question, and I address this in the book. So a couple things I want to say about it. First, remember, almost 50% of kids live in divorced homes. And I don't know, one in 3 kids are being raised by a single mom. Okay. So we don't always have that beautiful privilege, luxury, blessing to have 2 parents. So I think that both parents need to be completely comfortable, regardless of the gender of their child, boy, girl, to have these puberty conversations. Because if you're a divorced dad listening right now, your daughter, if you have a daughter, she might get her period at your house for the first time. Do you have pads? Are you prepared? Does she have a little bag that she keeps in her travel bag back and forth between mom and dad's house? So there's a section for in a divorced family. And this question, I will tell you again, 12 years, hundreds and hundreds, I have them saved, of index cards of questions. At least, the classes are usually, let's say, like 50 kids. At least 5 will ask in their anonymous questions. My parents are divorced. What do I do if I get my period at my dad's house? That is a big fear.
Yeah.
So if you're a single parent and you've got kids of both genders, or you're a dad, you just have girls, you're a mom, you just have boys, you've got to be prepared. So yeah, moms, you have to talk to them about wet dreams and ejaculation and sperm. And you've got to know the
same casual tone while you're frying an egg.
Yes, because if you go to their room at night,
this is hard for women. Pardon the pun. This is a really difficult thing
it totally
really
is
difficult.
This is difficult. And I'm going to completely confess. So I have 2 boys and a girl. And I'm going to completely confess, I keep telling you, I've been teaching this class for 12 years. So last year when my son Hudson was in 5th grade, they started this talk. And he comes home. I knew he was having it. Like a good parent, the night before, I was like, hey, bud, you're going to have that talk tomorrow at school. I just want to make sure, you're feeling comfortable. And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you've taught me everything. And I was like, we'll see. So he comes home and I go, so is there anything that you learned? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, great, what is it? And he's like, I didn't know that I could be sleeping and then stuff could come out of my penis. Like, he didn't know what a wet dream was. I did not teach him that.
Okay, wow, that he was comfortable enough to say
just like that
to you.
I'm not even kidding. I was sitting right here at this desk and he was like, it was like literally past the butter. Like it was nothing for him. And I go, oh my God. And the way I reacted was, you know what? You're totally right. I did not talk to you about that. And nor have I talked to almost any boy about that. And I was like, well, what do you think about it? And he's like, I think it's kind of weird. And I was like, yeah, it would throw you off. And he was like, yeah, they told us like if our sheets get like that, we should just take them off and like wash them. And so I was like, great, I'm going to keep rolling with this then. So I was like, yeah, I go, and you don't even have to tell me, bud. Like if that happens, just take your pajamas off if you want to clean your sheets and literally just put them in like the hamper or put them in the laundry room and I won't even ask you about it. And he's like, yeah, okay.
So the advice I'm getting from what you're saying is to just make it so casual. And so the way you just said it, that it's not weird. Because that's their biggest fear, is that it's going to be weird, or they're going to be judged, or that something's wrong with them for that happening.
Absolutely. You know, last year there was a book that came out called This Is So Awkward. And it's a book about talking about puberty. And that is the number one word that's associated with this time, awkward. And not just for kids, for parents too.
Yeah.
It's awkward. But the message is, yes, moms and dads, be comfortable enough to talk to your son or daughter. Now, kids generally gravitate toward, you know, boys gravitate more toward their dad. They probably would if they were really open, you know, if they were, because of course, you know, like you and I don't know what it's like to have an erection. I don't know what that feels like, but dad could talk about it. But if dad's not going to, and I write about this in the book, I have a husband, we live together, 2 sons. He has not had this talk with the boys. It's been me. He's uncomfortable with it. His story is in the book. He was like, you know, he blames it on his parents. He's like, my dad didn't have this talk, but he did hand me a book. And I was like, well, that's actually pretty awesome. Your dad handed you a book. He goes, yeah, one day he came into my room and he handed me this book and he was like, here, you should read this. He's like, and then he walked out.
Did he read it?
He read it and I bought it. And oh my gosh, you can't even imagine. Oh,
yeah.
Yes. It is not.
It had more questions than answers after that.
Well, yes, there's many. It sold 2.5 million copies.
But it was the only resource. There weren't the resources then.
There weren't. So people just bought it and it was illustrated like a comic book.
Oh,
my.
No.
The advice is horrifying for today's standards, you know, and then has illustrations in it of comic figures kind of things. But still, hey, his dad did something, but he's not comfortable. So he hasn't done it. It has been me. And then if we talk about girls, I think it's so cool. I will tell you, Natalie, I have more dads who say to me, yep, I just got comfortable being like, hey, I'm going to the store. Do you need tampons or pads? And I'm like, good for you. And I know they feel good because they're like, I'm doing it. I'm a girl dad. Like, I'm doing it. And it's true. And it's everything. Again, we focus on, for girls, the period part because that's generally the most like embarrassing and
the scariest for them.
Yeah, it's scary. And for boys, there's more probably around ejaculation. You know, we really, you know, masturbation is something that I would say that one's pretty high up there in the discomfort. And that's not just for boys, girls too, right? So I have scripts in the book. And I have a script in the book about talking about you might touch this part of your body and it might feel good. I just want you to know that that is normal. It's also something private. So if you're going to do that, the door should be closed. And that's something that, you know, you do in the privacy of your own bathroom or bedroom. So now I just rolled it out to you. I didn't go into too much detail. How did that feel listening to me say that?
Well, I think having the script felt very normal, just nonchalant. It's fine. Then it's not this big scary thing. But having a script for a parent of, I don't know what to say, that I think that's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
The words, you know, we think we'll come up with them and then sometimes we just don't. And then it comes out wrong. And so I think that's super helpful.
Absolutely. And I want to say one other thing about masturbation, because again, I know this is really uncomfortable. There could be, you know, sometimes where people have religious beliefs and they don't want to talk about it. And the reason why I talk about it in the way that I do is it really is natural. I talk about in the book that toddlers just discovering their body naturally touch their own genitals or private parts. And if it feels good, they'll keep touching it. And that's not sexualized for them. That's just exploration for them. So then you fast forward to, you know, a 10, 11, 12-year-old and they touch themselves or they wake up in the middle of the night and they're masturbating and they don't know why they're doing it. They're just like, you know, it feels like a huge mystery. Am I bad? Am I wrong? And so I just want to say, I want people's minds to open up to the fact that we probably need to at least normalize what's happening on a very natural level. That doesn't mean we have to endorse it. That doesn't mean we have to go into great detail about it, but it does mean that, you know, just to say there are times you may be exploring your body and touch it in a way that feels different or it might feel really good to you. And I want you to know that that's normal, but it's also very private. That's really the message. You don't have to say it's bad, it's good, I encourage it, I don't. You don't need to go into that. Just want you to know it's normal.
Yeah. That I think that is important because the shame part of so much of puberty is where I worry about the mental health of kids. And I know that's your passion and how you even got into this in the first place.
You're exactly right. I mean, of course I got into, working so much with the puberty part of things is as simple as just I worked with kids that were this age and they would come in and I would say for girls, the intro question is usually, so I'll say, is there anything, you want to talk about this week or what happened? And they'll say, yeah, I kind of need your help talking to my mom about something. Oh, okay. What? I think I need a bra. Believe it or not, that's the first one. That is the way I got into this.
I didn't think you were going there. I thought you were going to go like, I want to have sex or like something, but just as simple as I need a bra.
I need a bra. And they're so embarrassed. Now imagine they're embarrassed when they've got mom raising them. What if they don't have mom or they are with dad and they put on a shirt? Because it starts with your breast buds, right? These little lumps. And a girl might put on a certain shirt, like the type of shirt actually I have on today, very loose. Yeah. When it's really loose fitting, it shows anything that's underneath it, even more than even a tight shirt. And, to a level of discomfort. So what a girl's going to start doing is she's going to start tugging on her shirt. And what that translates to, I hope the message is coming across is I'm super self-conscious and uncomfortable right now in my own body. So all day long, I'm going to be off. I'm not going to focus so much on what the teacher's teaching me. I might not run around with the kids at the playground because I'm uncomfortable now in my chest. And guess what? At home, nobody has talked about a bra or gotten me one. And so I make that part of the class. But when I was one-on-one before I had a class, I would say, oh my gosh, sure. And I would sort of do the readiness talk, but really nonchalant. I'd say, what makes you think that you were needing a bra? I'd say 9 times out of 10, they give me the right answer, which is I've got things growing. And when I'm running, when I'm playing soccer, when I'm doing this, that, or the other, I kind of feel them moving and they kind of hurt. That's the other thing we might have forgotten, but when your breasts start to grow, they are actually usually sore.
Yeah.
There's a soreness and they don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
So it started off with that. Then I had a friend who went and actually took a class and she came back and talked to me and her daughter, I'll never forget, was in 4th grade. And she said, Parker and I over the weekend took this puberty class. And I literally at the time said, already? And she was like, yeah. I go, she's only in 4th grade though. And she was like, oh my God, it was exactly what we needed. And it got me thinking, that was before I had a class. Like if a 4th grader came to me one-on-one and I would just go with it and talk. But I never thought about it. Like there's somebody giving a class for 4th graders. So I started and then, honestly, like within 6 months, I was like, I'm going to do that here. That was in California. And then since then it's a 4th and 5th grade class. I used to say it was a 5th, 6th. I mean, 6th graders can come, but now I do 4th, 5th, 6th, and I've had 3rd graders come too.
Wow. Well, it sounds like in the public school, we need to make some changes, well, private schools too, and bring that age down a little bit to prepare these kids.
That's true. That's so true. Yeah. I have a dream, Natalie, and my dream is that we actually create health education. So we don't call it sex ed. We call it health ed. Yeah. And it's a K through 12 curriculum. And imagine what a different, we are so focused. We still have a youth mental health crisis. And we are so focused on, basically not prevention, just intervention, dis-ease, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what if in kindergarten, right? Health ed, you come up with a curriculum that's totally age appropriate for kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. And it includes things like digital media, digital health, we could call it digital health. Here are some healthy habits. Hey, you're 6 years old. This is how long your eyes should be looking at a screen, right? Now you fast forward, you're 10 years old. You should know about, and then here are the things happening on social media. Here's things happening in your brain. Here's what's happening in your body. If it's not happening to you now, it's probably happening to someone you're sitting next to.
Yeah.
That's my dream. And even 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, then you get into drugs and sex and those kinds of things at age appropriate times.
It sounds like your next book, Sheryl. I think,
this is really my dream around like actually a curriculum.
Yeah. I think a curriculum. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And yes.
I know. And I think if we could lay it out, because this is in the book too, it's really interesting, but in many states, including Colorado, there is no requirement. There are no requirements. You do not have to do sex ed. I think it's 28 states. You don't have to. And if you do, it's not really standardized. You can do what you want. You can say what you want, do what you want. So I think that, this is the thing. Without it, we got to try to take politics out of it, because there's actually been in the last few years some rollbacks of some what I honestly will call health education. And, people, I get it. Some parents are worried, like, oh my gosh, are you talking about sex and pornography with my elementary school age kid? I mean, we know that by 11 years old, kids are viewing pornography online. And trust me, I hate this conversation too. This is one that I personally do still feel discomfort around. But I do it because I don't want to be naive and leave my kid out. So I've had the conversation.
They could even accidentally find it, though. We know that. I mean, it's a whole nother topic we could use for this purpose.
It is.
Yeah,
it really is. But one thing I'll just briefly say is kids aren't searching usually at 11 years old the word. They're not saying pornography into a Google search. What they are doing is they're putting in things like, what should my penis look like?
Yeah.
Why are my boobs getting big?
Right. And then guess what comes up?
That leads to a rabbit hole.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So
innocently.
if there's somebody on here that's listening thinking, no, not my kid, or, oh my gosh, I'm never even using that word in my house, go figure out how to do a search history. If you've got a 10, 11, 12, and definitely an adolescent, if you can go into their Google, go into their search history, I promise there are curious questions in there.
Of course. Those questions that we didn't have the ability as young people to look that up, but we ask Google everything. Of course.
Yes, but do you remember what we did as young people when we had those curiosities?
We asked friends. I mean, that was about the access we had. Or we had the Sears catalog that boys would pull out and see bras and, and that's what.
Yes. And you figured out whose family home the dad maybe had a subscription to Playboy.
Boy, times have changed. Yeah.
Yes, but the curiosity hasn't changed.
The curiosity will always be there. That's part of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. Yeah. Oh, we need to do this again and pick some of these subtopics because they're so, so valuable. And I'm so glad you wrote this book, The Crucial Years, out in May, you said?
Yes.
And is there a link we can put in the show notes for pre-order?
Yeah, people can pre-order on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but you can go to my website, drsherylziegler.com, and there are links there and more information. And
great.
Thank you for letting me share this with you and your audience in the world. It's obviously you can see something I'm really passionate about and really excited about.
Well, I just value you and the education you give us and the work that you've done. So thank you so much. And we do need to not wait a couple of years and do it again. Good luck with the new book. I know it's going to be super successful.
Thank you, Natalie. Best to you too. Great to see you.